Hello again, it's Lee from Covertcraft, down in the woods on a nice sunny evening. Birds are just starting to come in and sing their evening song. I'm going to be joined by a few friends this weekend, and we're going to have a look at a few woodworking projects. The one I'm going to concentrate on filming is going to be Gypsy flowers. I've got a friend who specialises in making these, Chris Allen from One Day Woodcraft. He's going to come up and show us his technique for making those, which is going to be really interesting because I've seen the results before. So we're going to learn the techniques and get some footage of that so we can share that with you. I'm just going to have a little wander around and enjoy the rest of the evening in the woods before the sun goes down. Looks like we've got about half an hour or so left. Just about time to enjoy the birds. Having a little sing-song before they go to bed.
So yeah, we're going to make gypsy flowers using willow rods. Just talk about the tools quickly. This is a Ben Orford draw knife. It's fairly big and chunky. I love this piece of kit, and I'm just going to use it to create a point on what's going to be the base of the flower.
That's a four-sided point you're making there, is it?
Yep, it can be 4, 5, 6, 7, depends on
Whatever you feel
how you
comfortable.
feel. The most important thing is to get this point roughly in line with the pith, slightly offset because it's a curved rod. So the next knife I move to is a Svanti Jarv draw knife. It's 20 centimetres, something like that, and a very useful bit of kit. I'm using it bevel up, and that will become clear as I start making the flower. So at this stage is just peeling the bark, and then I just twist it up to put a fold in the bark. Give me a reference line to work to.
The reason I polished them so much is because
so there, I've just come through a little pin knot. It just means you've got to be a bit stronger.
Yeah.
I like including the bark because it adds extra colour. So just blasted through that knot and then the twist. So I am angling my draw knife here just out of habit. You can do them dead straight. Makes no difference in the petal because the bark doesn't curl like the wood will. So with this knot it's really quite big, and what I'm going to do is just cheat a little bit, come further down, and we'll just end up with smaller petals, which isn't going to be a problem, especially when you bunch them up together. You can lose any little bits off to the side in the centre. So coming round to the end, that's the same length. You can see here I've not quite cut all the inner bark off. That doesn't matter, that can go into the wooden petals. It's quite useful just to run your fist down and make sure that these are all bending at the same point. But what I've done is I've generated a multifaceted shape on this rod, and I'm now going to follow these facets to create the petals. So I tend to use only a small amount of the draw knife. I'm just going to run it down the wood. You see the petal is curling there, and then turn the wood. So that's the petal we just made. I'm going to go on to the adjacent facet, exactly the same thing. So you start slightly steep, you cut through a tiny little bit of bark, and then flatten the draw knife out until you get your petal working. So the other point that's important to note is that you're going to work to the same line or as close to it as you can. If you start stopping incrementally further up as you create more petals, you end up with a tall flower that doesn't quite look as nice. So that was the one we've just cut. We're on the facet next to it, and I'm going to do 3 cuts in one position here. So I've turned the rod so that the facet adjacent to the one that we're going to cut is now uppermost. So I'll be able to cut the left hand facet first. The second one is the one that's in the perfect alignment, and then I'll angle over to do the third one. So on the draw knife technique that I'm using, I'm actually trying to induce a 45-degree angle. In this plane I'll just steepen it up ever so slight to get the bite, and then start the petal, and then sliding down, and you'll notice what I'm not doing is sliding the whole blade of the knife down like that. I find it's not necessary in this approach. So just taking a little bit of care to get the facets working and set the angle of the petals, and in my haste there I've done 2 in the same one, not the end of the world. I'm just starting lower than that knot, because if I started up here I'd have to blast through the knot and then I'd have no control into the facet that I'm trying to generate. Just peel that out of the way. So that's the one I've just done. Back onto the side one. This is the 3rd cut in the same rod orientation, and you can, in the same way we folded the bark, you can just ease the petal back, and that just helps opening these splits up down to the same line. So same thing again, that's facet number 2 is now uppermost. I'm going to angle over and work to the side. We just did a flower with Lee, and he was finding it was much easier just to work singly on one facet that's pointing directly up towards you. So that's perhaps a good tip as you start out trying this technique. So I'm maintaining a fairly firm but not too firm a grip. So I just lost my place here. If you look into the flowers that I've made, that one's got 2 on it, so that's definitely the facet that I need to cut next. I'll double check that. 1, 2, 1. There we go. And that's fairly extreme over to the side, a little bit more than I normally like. And what I'm trying to do is eat into this uppermost facet so that it becomes even. You might find that a little challenging at the start, but the evenness does come out in the product at the end. You end up getting a nice sort of circular motion to the flower. So we're up in that knot. There we go, that's a really good one. And that last little tug is just to get right down to the bottom, and then just using my finger there just to flatten it out a little bit. Unlike other gypsy flowers that I've seen people make, these are much flatter in the horizontal plane rather than being globe-like. I'm just going to keep working. So here you can see how the blade is touching these petals. Sometimes you'll end up cutting the petals. I think that one's had a bit of impact on it. It's kind of inevitable. I don't really worry too much about a few petals and falling off. They are fairly robust, these, as a product. There we go, that's looking good. One thing that we found when Lee was doing his flower was he was cutting very deeply, which affects the curl and the end product. And then one time he slipped, went fairly quick, and that ends up with the petal thinning out like that one there. So you're looking to apply a little bit of downward pressure and drag the tool back towards you. I've got my elbows locked in. You're only travelling a short distance, so make it nice and even as you go down. So now we've got a fair few petals on there. I've got at least 2 rounds, 2.5, coming up to 3. What I'm going to do is start steepening the draw knife to put more of a point onto this waste material here. And the reason behind that is so that you start thinning the junction between the rod and the flower down. I'm just going to keep going round and just angling the tool up ever so slightly, just over exaggerating there, and that just adds another facet onto the rod, which starts to thin down the material. The other thing that I do when I'm getting close to the end is I start skipping facets. So this one is the next one to be cut in the previous sequence, but I'm going to skip it and work on this one. I'm also going to shorten the petal by starting, 3/4 of an inch further down, and what that should do is just fill in the middle to a certain extent, So we've just cut this facet. I'm going to skip one, move on to the next. Great, it's the one with the knot, and start a little bit further down. And instead of reaching out where all the other petals are, they just sit on top of them ever so slightly. Let's start further down, and you can really get some lovely curls because you're shortening them up. I miss one, onto the next, short, and you have to go a lot steeper there because we're introducing the facet. We're coming onto the facet that got created when the ramp fell off. This is going to be one of my last petals before I break off. So that was the bit we were working. This is where I want to be on next. Nice short petal, and very, very steep. So if we just take a quick look at that, this is the petal that we've just cut. You can see how it's sort of fractured and delaminated. That's because I've made the cut very steep and it's broken the flower from the rod. If you don't get all the way down and break off like that, which has got its hazards, what you can do is just take hold of the base of the flower and start rocking side to side. You'll find the weak point, that'll crack, and then you bend it the other way and maybe in a couple of other planes, and that'll come off. And what I'll do is I'll aggressively steepen that, and then yeah, that's come right down to the wood around the pith. So I'm just trying to break it in different directions so I get an even break.
Yeah.
And that's what you end up with. So that's your finished flower. I'm just going to tidy it up a little bit. You can have a look at it. I've been doing these for a few years, so I just sort of arranged the petals a little bit to be pretty, but that's come off the horse pretty well. So you can leave them as they are. They're much more useful with a stem, and what I'll do is I'll use an awl, a brad awl, to widen this hole in the pith, and then I'll use a little stick, which is actually one of the shoots that grow off these sails where the leaves grow, and that'll be put into the bottom of the flower, probably a foot long, and then I'll have individual stems which I'll bunch up and tie up with raffia, which hopefully we can get some footage of in a short minute.